Well, praise the Lord. This is Sister Sharon, and this is Mass Memorial C.M.E. Sunday School for November 13th, 2022. We are on our fall quarter, A Living Faith. Unit 3, What Does Faith Cost? Our lesson today is Paul sails for Rome. Our key verse, and the rest, some on boards and some on parts of the ship, and so it was that they all escaped safely to land. Acts the 27th chapter, the 44th verse. Our lesson scripture is Acts the 27th chapter, verses 1 and 2, and 33 through 44, but I'm going to do the entire chapter. Amen. And then let's look at our lesson background. Again, we're in the book of Acts, or Acts of the Apostles, or Acts of the Holy Spirit. The author is Luke, the physician. He also wrote the gospel according to Luke. It was written to Theophilus, which means loved by God, but also friend of God. The setup of the book of Acts is it gives the account of the beginning and early work of the church of Jesus Christ. It starts with the ascension of Jesus Christ and ends with Paul, a prisoner in Rome. Again, we're talking about Paul today. Saul in Hebrew, the name Saul in Hebrew means ask or question. In Latin, the name Paul means small or humble. Paul was a Jewish Roman citizen who was originally a persecutor of the early church. He converted to Christianity after having a vision of Jesus Christ, blinded by the light, they call it, or the Damascus Road experience. He's credited with writing 13 to 14 books of the 27 books in the New Testament. His earthly credentials can be found in 2 Corinthians, the 11th chapter, verses 22 through 27. And he's a Roman. You can find that in Acts, the 22nd chapter, verses 27 and 28, that was sent to Rome to plead the cause of Christ and his case. So today we're going to do Acts, the 27th chapter, and some of the verses are skipped, but I'm going to just run over them. And I know some people just listen to me talk, okay, or listen to me teach, but I do have maps. Okay, it's the same map, but I presented several times so that as we're going through the actual trip to get to almost get to Rome today. We're not getting to Rome today, but almost getting to Rome today, that you can see the journey. So, and I also have a few things color coded, but again, you might want to actually look at the lesson today. But if not, praise the Lord for you listening to it. So starting off with Acts 27, verses 1 through 12. And I call it decisions should be made on God's counsel. And so it says, and when it was decided that we should sail to Italy. So remember, we talked about that Paul had asked to go to see Caesar, to put his case before Caesar. And we talked about that last week. And so since he asked, even though they found him really not guilty, because he did a plea to Caesar, he had to go to Rome. And so this is the beginning of that trip to Rome. And it says, and then when it was decided that we should sail to Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to one named Julius, a centurion of the Augustan regiment. So in centurion means that they were a commander of at least 100 soldiers. Okay, so he was a Roman commander of at least 100 soldiers. So entering a ship of Amadramythium, we put to sea, meaning to sail along the coast of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. Okay, so I want you to also notice the word we put to sea. So remember, Luke is writing this. So Luke also ends up on the ship. Okay, so Luke is actually there. So Paul is under arrest, but Luke is actually on the ship with Paul, as well as the soldiers, as well as Aristarchus. Okay, and other prisoners. So then when I have a map, so you can see where they were. So they started off, if you look at the bottom right of the map, Caesarea. He was there for 2 years. And so then now he's getting ready to do this traveling. Okay. And so he's leaving from there and they're going to travel. And so it says, and the next day we landed at Sidon. So you see Sidon is just north of Caesarea. And Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him liberty to go to his friends and receive care. So it was said that there was a church in Sidon. And so the idea was that, but Julius was gracious. He showed favor to Paul. Okay, because there were other prisoners. He didn't say, oh, everybody go see their friends and everybody go see their family. And, but Paul, he treated kindly and gave him liberty. okay, to go to see his friends and receive care. When he had put to sea from there, we sailed under the shelter of Cyrus. So now they're on a smaller boat when they started this, okay, because the winds were contrary. So they were on a smaller boat. And when we had sailed over the sea, which is of Sicilia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing to Italy, and he put us on board. So they ended up getting on a larger boat. Okay, so when they end up getting on a larger boat that was an Egyptian boat believed to be a grain barge. So it was larger, could hold a good number of people, and we'll see how many people it held in later part of the lesson. But they changed boats. So because the winds, now here the winds were already contrary when they were in the first boat, but they got into a larger boat. Okay, but the winds were contrary. So if you look at the map, they weren't sailing straight across. Remember, they're trying to go to Rome. They could have sailed straight across, okay? So straight west, but they didn't do that because of the wind and because of the size of the boat. They actually went north, and now they're going west. Okay, and then they're going along the coastline to avoid some of that wind. So just showing you the map again, so I don't have to keep going back to it. So it says, when we had sailed slowly many days and arrived with difficulty off Nidus, okay, the wind not permitting us to proceed. So they already were having trouble with the wind. We sailed under the shelter of Crete off Salmone. Passing it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens near the city of Lasea. Okay, so if you look at the map, you'll see that that is numbered 8 and 9. Okay, 8 and 9 on the map. Okay, so again, they're already having trouble with the wind. Okay, so then now it says in verse 9, now when much time had been spent and selling was now dangerous because the fast was already over. So when they say the fast, what they're talking about is actually the Day of Atonement. Okay, and in Judaism, that's Yom Kippur, but that's a season of fasting. And so the fast, like this year, was October 4th. 2022, but it's normally right in that area. Okay, and so it's later in the year. So we now know this isn't summer, this isn't spring, it's like October. Okay, and the fast was over, Yom Kippur was over, and so it's getting into winter, and the selling is getting more and more dangerous because of the season. So Paul ends up advising them, saying, men, I perceive that this voyage will end with disaster and much loss, not only of the cargo and ship, but also our lives. So remember, the wind is bad. They're already having difficulty. You know what I mean? It's the time of year, is late in the year. Basically, we think about it, honestly, if you think about Florida, okay, using that as an example, there's a hurricane season. Okay, so here, this is a dangerous season for them to be traveling. So, like in Florida, the hurricane season normally is toward it's September, October, definitely, and then we not notice it went into November with this last hurricane that hit just last week. Okay, but it's just that's a dangerous season for traveling. And so here they said the time of the fast was already over. Yom Kippur was already over. So this is now into October, and this is not a safe time. And Paul just advises them, as a man of God, he just advises them. He says, um, this is going to end in much disaster and loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also it could end in our lives. Okay. But nevertheless, the centurion was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than by the things spoken by Paul. Now we have to realize Paul is a prisoner. Okay. He is a prisoner, even though he's been given favor, and he speaks boldly. The centurion was like, why am I going to listen to this prisoner? But what they didn't realize is this is a man of God. And he's giving them this concern. He's giving them this warning that this is going to be a disastrous trip. But the centurion, the soldier in charge, listened to the helmsman and the owner of the ship, and they're like, oh, we'll be fine. And because the harbor was not suitable to winter in, so where they were, it wasn't a good place to winter in. One of my commentaries said it was a good amount of miles. The port was a good amount of miles from the city. Remember, they got prisoners, they got soldiers. So they didn't want to winter there. They didn't want to stop the boat and winter there. So their goal was, as it says, their goal was to get over to Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, okay, opening toward the southwest and northwest and winter there. It was a large harbor. It was a great place for them to winter. So they knew that they were going to have to winter. They weren't going to make this trip just in one go. But so they decided we got to move. Okay. So if we look at our map again, they were at like 8 and 9 and they wanted to get over to 11. And you would say, well, that's just on the other side of Crete. They should be able to make it. Okay. So they were 8, 9, then they ended up at 10 and they were trying to get over to where 11 is, where Phoenix is. Okay. That was their goal. And so they said, we're going to, because that's a great place to spend the winter. Now, I have a couple of verses for us, extra verses. And it says, Proverbs 14:12, and I've told you all this verse before. There's a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way of death. And so here, the helmsman, the owner of the ship, the centurion, seems like a good plan to them. They say, oh, we'll just go around Crete. We'll be fine. We'll just go around to the other side of Crete, and then we'll be in a spot, Phoenix, which is a great place to winter. So it's a good idea, but it wasn't a God idea. Okay. Then Proverbs 19:12 says, there are many plans in a man's heart. Nevertheless, the Lord's counsel, that will stand. So again, man of God is saying, this isn't a good idea. But they're going. And remember, he had been treated well in Caesarea. He had been treated well. He had been blessing other people. He had spoke kindly when, even though he was a prisoner, he was very respectful when he was talking to King Agrippa and to Felix and to Festus and Bernice. The other week, he was very polite and nice. And he was a man of God and he was standing on the cause of Christ Jesus, but they weren't listening because he's a prisoner. Okay. And also, there was a way that seemed right to them, but that end could lead in death. And again, there's many plans that we might make in our own hearts. Nevertheless, the Lord's counsel, that's going to stand. And so we need to be careful to well, be on the Lord's side, say it that way. I also have the verse Acts 5:29, the second part that says we ought to obey God rather than men. Okay. So we need to always pray and obey God. Okay. And so again, Paul warned them, but they're like, we can make it around Crete. We can make it to the other side and we can winter in Phoenix. So now we're at Acts 27:13-20. And I call this there will be storms. And then I say, let them not be of your own making. Okay. So then remember, all they're doing is trying to go around Crete, okay, to the other side of Crete. Okay. So it says, when the south wind blew softly. So they're like, oh, yeah, this is going to work. Supposing that they had obtained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close by Crete. Because again, all they're trying to do is go around Crete to the other side. But not long after, okay, a tempestuous headwind arose called Euroclydon. Now that actually is a combination of the words east and north. Okay, it's a Greek Latin composition of those words, which basically means it's a east northeast wind. Okay, but it was a tempestuous wind. So I would like to say tsunami type wind, hurricane force winds, tornado type winds. Okay, but it's on water, so we say tsunami, tropical storm, hurricane, or even some versions of the Bible say gale, Gale. It was gale force winds. Okay, but they thought they had this nice soft south wind because they wanted wind. You know what I mean? They're in a boat. You know what I mean? But then all of a sudden, this tempestuous headwind comes up against them. So and the ship gets caught. So the ship was caught and could not head into the wind. We let her drive. And running under the shelter of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. Okay. And the skiff is a little boat that's connected to the big one. When they had taken it on board, they used cable to undergird the ship, and fearing lest they should run aground on the Syrtis sands, they struck sail and so were driven. So they're caught in this bad weather, okay, bad storm. And because we were exceedingly tempest tossed, the next day they lightened the ship. Okay. On the third day, we threw the ship's tackle, that's all the equipment and stuff, overboard with our own hands. Now, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days. Okay, so that just meant the sky was dark. Okay, they couldn't see the sun. It was cloudy. They couldn't see the stars. It didn't look good. When we know how things look in a bad storm. Okay, so when sun nor stars appeared for many days and no small tempest beat on us. In other words, it was rocking the boat. Okay, all hope that we would be saved was finally given up. So people just like, man, we not gonna make it. So then I just show the map again, because again, you see that they went from, they were trying to get to 11, okay, um, but they actually ended up, because of that wind, okay, that Euroclydon, they ended up around 13, okay, by the Syrtis Bank. So now they're out in this open water, they're way out there, okay. And then other thing you have to be careful of is you see down Africa is just south, and that part of Africa they say actually had quicksand. Okay, so they don't get caught in a quicksand either. They don't want to go all the way south, but so they're caught into this tempest tossed sea. That's where they are. And so then I have John 16:33. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Just in that idea that, we think about peace be still, but even Paul, even though they were giving up hope, in a sense, the people were giving up hope, um, they were just still holding on. All right, because it also says in 1 Peter 4:12-13. Beloved, do not think it is strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing happened to you. But rejoice in the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. So, in other words, we're going to have storms in our life. And that's what I'm giving these verses about. Not about they were in a physical storm, but we end up in storms. We end up in physical storms, but we also end up in mental storms. We end up in spiritual storms. We end up in just catastrophes in life. Okay. And so these verses are for us, that we need to hold our peace. Okay. Hold our peace, be of good cheer, because Jesus has overcome the world. And also, a lot of times when we go through something, we say, well, why me? But so 1 Peter 4:12-13 basically says, why do you think it's strange that you're going to go through something? Okay. That you're going to go through a fiery trial, like that this is a strange thing. It's not a strange thing, because as we partake in Christ's sufferings, and then when his glory is revealed, okay, we'll be glad with exceeding joy. But it's just letting us know there are going to be trials in Christian life on this journey. Okay, there are going to be storms. Okay, now we're to Acts 27 verses 21-26, and I call it God keeps his promises. We're almost to our lesson. What it says, so they're in this storm. It doesn't look like they're going to make it. Okay. Um, and then it says they're throwing everything overboard. They hadn't thrown everything, but all the equipment, all the tackle and stuff is thrown over. The riggings, all that's thrown off the ship to lighten the ship. Okay. But it says, but after long abstinence from food, so they hadn't been eating, then Paul stood in the midst of them and said, men, you should have listened to me. So, that's I told you so. Okay. Now, he did say I told you so, basically. Okay. But then he kept going to encourage them. He said, men, you should have listened to me and not have sailed from Crete and incurred the disaster and loss. And now I urge you to take heart. So now he says, he's like comforting their heart now. For there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. Okay. For there stood by me this night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve, saying, do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar. And indeed, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So this is unmerited favor. So Paul knew he had to make it, but then God encouraged him by sending an angel to reiterate to him, you must go before Caesar. You are going to be a witness to Caesar. And he said, so in other words, Paul knew he was going to make it, but then God in his grace said, everyone on the ship, okay, everyone on the ship, long as they stayed on the ship, would make it. Okay. He said, granted you all those who sail with you. And so he told them, do not be afraid. And we see that through this lesson. Fear not, fear not. Somewhere I read that there's 365 fear nots in the Bible, one for every day of the year, but not sure if that's true. But fear not. God says there's a plan. and your life is spared and everyone on the boat with you. Okay. And so Paul did say, I told you so. He said, I told you so, or you didn't listen to me. But he went on and encouraged them and let them know about um him hearing from the angel. And then he says, the angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve. So here he is in the midst of all this, still being a witness, talking about the God who he belongs to and the God that he serves. And so then it just says in verse 25, therefore take heart, men, for I believe God that it will be just as it was told me. However, we must run aground on a certain island. Okay, so in other words, the ship is not going to make it. Okay, and I think about that even again, like with the hurricanes. It's sad when there's a loss of life, but I think about even like the time in 2018 when my family went through the Hurricane Michael. The thing that was amazing was all our property was damaged, severely damaged. It looked like a war zone, but nobody died. Nobody died. And that was amazing when you saw the devastation of the homes and everything just ripped up, roofs ripped off, almost falling. But people lived through it, And so here is that idea that you're basically in this tempestuous wind. You're going to lose the boat. You're going to lose the property, but you're not going to lose the souls. You're not going to lose the people. And one thing also, just to go with this, remember the angel encouraged him, but also in Acts 23:11, okay, Paul was told this earlier. So this is just confirmation of what God had told him. Because Acts 23:11 says, but the following night the Lord stood by him and said, be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome. So he had to get to Rome. Okay. He had to get to Rome because, again, God is not a man that he should lie. Okay. Nor the Son of Man that he has to repent. So therefore, God told him that he had to bear witness at Rome. The angel came and confirmed, okay, or encouraged him again that you must be brought before Caesar. And so he knew that his life was spared, but then God in his grace also spared everyone on the ship. That means all the prisoners, Luke, okay, because Luke's on the ship, okay, Julius, the centurion, the soldiers, okay, the people, the captain of the ship and the helmsman, all of them, all the sailors. God said, all those who sail with you, okay, he's granting all their lives. And so then I have Psalm 107:20 that says he sent his word and healed them and delivered them from their destructions. So yeah, things were about to get be a real physical destruction. But a word came. Is there a word from the Lord? A word came through the angel and he sent his word and delivered them from their destructions. And then I have for us also, again, because a lot of these scriptures are for us about the storms we go through in life. So even though they're going through a physical storm, we go through storms as in life. So Isaiah 43, 1b through 3a says, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. Okay, and I'm going to stop there for a minute. I have a statement. When someone gives you a name, the name defines who you are and whose you are. So at birth, your parents give you a name. In marriage, especially in the past, the woman's name would change. Okay. And so it defines who you are and whose you are. Okay. And so, and that's even the case in a sense, unfortunately, with slavery, that they would change people's names. And I still remember Roots, and I remember Kunta Kinte and how he was saying, they kept wanting to call him Toby, and he kept saying, my name is Kunta Kinte. You know what I mean? Because they were trying to name him and have power over him in that sense. And he was holding on to who he was, who his parents named him. And so that idea was if your name, when someone gives you a name, the name defines who you are and whose you are. Okay. And so again, it says in Isaiah 43, 1 through 3, fear not, for I have redeemed you. So this is God talking. I have called you by your name. You are mine. Okay. That's whose we are. When you pass through the waters, which they are doing, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall flame scorch you, for I am the Lord your God. Okay, so it doesn't say we don't go through. See, people say, oh, it says, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you're going to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. You're going to go through the waters. You're going to go through the rivers. You're going to go through the fire. Remember, why do you think it's strange about these fiery trials that try you? We go through. Okay. But we do go through. We don't stay in. And we don't go through alone. Okay. Okay. For I am the Lord your God. God never leaves us. God never forsakes us. He's always with us. Okay. And he's named us. Okay. And so the idea was even for Paul and all those with him. Okay. They were going to make it through these waters. Now, Acts 27 through 32, I say, stay anchored in the Lord. It says, now when the 14th night had come, so they're still out here in the water, as we were driven up and down in the Adriatic Sea, and some say it's not the same Adriatic Sea as we call it now. But it says, about midnight, the sailors sensed that they were drawing near some land, and they took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little farther, they took soundings again and found it to be 15 fathoms. Then here goes the fear again. The fear welled back up in the sailors. Then fearing lest we should run aground on the rocks. But remember, the boat's going to get ripped up. That's already was told. They dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. So it's interesting that they're praying. We don't know what gods they were praying to, but we know the God that Paul and Luke were praying to. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship, when they had let down the skiff into the sea, so they put the skiff back in the sea under pretense of putting out anchors from the prow. So in other words, they put the little boat back out there because they were about to get on the little skiff, and get out of there. Because again, that fear welled up in them. Okay, that fear welled up in them. And so then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. And I think about the song, "'Tis the old ship of Zion, get on board, get on board." Okay, and you have to stay on the ship. Okay, you got to stay in the hedge of protection. And so they were getting ready to sneak off the ship. Because that fear rose up. But now Paul is speaking. And Paul was right from the beginning when he told them it was dangerous. But now he's got, before they were listening to the sailors, and now the centurion's listening to Paul. He's like, okay, I'm going with Paul. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the skiff and let it fall off. So in other words, no, y'all can't go, get off, and pretend you're putting out the anchors and you really getting off the boat to save yourself. Okay. Because you don't think we're gonna make it. He said, now the boat's not gonna make it. Now, and then that's the whole staying anchored in the Lord in the storm. There's a song sung by a gospel singer, Douglas Miller. It says, my soul's been anchored in the Lord, and the billows may roll, the breakers may dash. I will not stray because you hold me fast. And so it's just a beautiful song. It says, my soul basically stays anchored in the Lord. Okay. And so with that in mind, we need to be anchored in the Lord. The storms are going to come. Okay. We don't need to, we need to fear not. We need to trust God, and we need to not jump ship. There are people who go away from God when they go through a storm. We need to get closer to God if we're going all the time. Just not even when we're going through a storm. We just need to draw me nearer, precious Lord. Okay. So we need to be drawn nearer and not go away. And that's the soldiers were getting ready to get off the boat, because of fear. Okay. And remember, you got to be careful. Fear, the acronym with fear is false evidence appearing real. So it looked like they were going to lose their lives, but Paul had already told them through the word of the Lord that they weren't going to lose their lives as long as they stayed on that ship. Okay. And so then the centurion listened to Paul this time. Now we're to the lesson. Amen. So believe God, there is deliverance. Okay. And as day was about to dawn, Paul implored them to all take food because they hadn't been eating, saying, today is the 14th day you have waited and continued without food and eaten nothing. Therefore, I urge you to take nourishment, for this is for your survival, since not a hair will fall from the head of any of you. And when he had said these things, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. So they had not been eating. Okay, it had been 14 days. Like I said, they're going through, and then also just think about it, the water is going up and down, and you get seasickness, but they hadn't been eating because maybe food wasn't even going to stay down. But he's like, okay, and they survived this long without it, but now he's saying it's time to eat. He said for your survival, you need to take nourishment. You got to have strength. And remember, the boat's not going to make it. And we'll talk about that. The ship's not going to make it, but they got to be strong. Okay. And so he says, not a hair on your head's going to come off. You know how it says that God even knows the hairs on our head. So he's like, not a hair on your head's going to fall off of you. He said, but you need to eat. And so then he went ahead as an example. Okay. He took bread. Okay. Remember, they were on a grain ship. He took bread, and he thanked God for the bread. Okay. In front of all of them. And then he broke it and he began to eat. And then they were all, verse 36, and they were all encouraged, and they also took food for themselves. Okay, and then Luke tells us this. He says, and in all, we were 276 persons on the ship. So this is a large ship. 276 people are on this ship. So when they had eaten enough, they lined the ship and threw out the wheat into the sea. Okay, so remember, it was a grain ship, grain barge. There were 276 people on there. They hadn't eaten, but Paul said, you need to eat. So he ate he ate, he blessed the food. He blessed his bread and he ate. And then they got encouraged, and all of them ate like they needed to. And then whatever was left, they threw into the sea to lighten the boat again. Okay. But they ate first. Then I have a couple of just quotes. One of them says, feed your faith and your fears will starve to death. And so the author's unknown on that. And I just thought that was a nice verse of the fact that they were actually eating bread. But in other words, believing God that their lives were gonna be spared. That feeds into their faith. Okay, and then you starve your fears to death. Okay, and then Dr. Tony Evans says faith is acting like God is telling the truth. So Paul told them what God said. You're not going to lose your life, so you might as well eat. Okay, you're not going to lose your life. You stay on the boat. So faith is acting like God is telling the truth. So let's eat. Let's stay on the boat. We know we're going to lose the ship, but we're not going to lose our lives. So we need to believe that God is telling the truth and have faith. Remember, that's the name of this whole quarter. It's about faith. Okay. How much does faith cost is what we're talking about right now. But faith is acting like God is telling the truth. And we need to feed our faith and starve our fears to death. Last part of our lesson. Acts 27:39-44. I call it God uses brokenness to bring salvation, to bring deliverance, to bring healing. When it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they observed a bay with a beach onto which they planned to run the ship if possible. And they let go of the anchors and left them in the sea. So they, again, lightening everything else. Meanwhile, loosing the rudder ropes, and they hoisted the mainsail to the wind and made for shore. So they got the big sail up now. But striking a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable. So you got the part of the boat stuck, but the stern, the stern was being broken up by the violence of the waves. So the front is stuck and the back is breaking up because of the violence of the waves. Now, these soldiers are still going through that, and I have in green every time they do this fear stuff. And the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim away and escape. Now, let me tell you why. It was Roman policy, that if any prisoners escaped, the soldiers were killed because they let them escape. So the soldiers were like, I'm not dying for these people. And these are prisoners. So we need to just kill all of them so that we be okay, so that I don't get killed by the Roman authority. Okay. But the centurion, see, now the centurion has changed, okay, wanting to save Paul. Because remember, Paul's one of the prisoners, wanting to save Paul, kept them from their purpose. He told the soldiers, nope, don't kill any of these prisoners, okay? And commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land. So it's good that they ate, okay, because they needed their strength, because now they have to swim to the land because the boat is just ripped, the ship is all ripped up. And the rest, some on boards and some on parts of the ship. So they were holding on to parts of the broken ship. Okay. And so it was that they all escaped safely to land. They all escaped safely to land. But God uses brokenness to bring salvation, to bring deliverance, to bring healing. And so they arrived on land, some by swimming, but some on broken pieces. And I just want to show you how God uses brokenness. In Mark 6, the feeding of the 5,000, there was broken bread and fish. In Matthew 15, the feeding of the 4,000, there was broken bread and fish. In Mark 2, the healing of the paralytic, the roof had to be broken in order to bring the lower him down in front of Jesus. In Judges 7, Gideon and Israel's victory, there were broken pitchers. In Isaiah 61, there's the healing of the brokenhearted. In 1 Corinthians 11:24, Jesus' broken body, not his bones, but his body was broken for us. So, and then just this quote from Christine Kane from her book, Unshakable: broken people break people, but rebuilt people build people. Okay. So God doesn't want us to stay in brokenness, but God can use brokenness, and God has used brokenness. And so now, just to end this lesson, because we're always talking about faith, but in summary, this is from the Discovery lesson, page 62. It talks about the word calm, about being calm. And they use an acronym for calm. And that acronym is call on God during crisis. So C, call on God during crisis. A, anticipate God stepping in to save us. L, listen to God's instructions. And M, make known God's promises. So calm, call on God during crisis. That's what Paul stayed in constant contact in prayer to God. A, anticipate God stepping in to save us, and Paul said, God is going to save us. L, listen to God's instructions. God's instructions were they need to stay on the ship. M, make known God's promises. And that's what Paul did. He didn't just keep them to himself. He told the centurion, he told the sailors, he told the soldiers God's promises that they all would be spared, long as they stayed on the ship. So again, calm. Call on God. We need to do that. Call on God during crisis, anticipate God stepping in to save us, listen to God's instructions, and make known God's promises. And then finally, the last thing I'm saying, because we see all these keep calm signs all the time, but this is the one for us. Keep calm, pray, trust, and have faith in God. This is our lesson for this Sunday. Be blessed, love in Christ, Sister Sharon.